Hi everyone, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the last session with Rashad on data and technology. Next up we have Justin Greenstein, who is going to be talking to us about one of my passions this year, and certainly something I'll be covering editorially next year, which is culture risk or risk culture. Justin, are you on the line?
I am, thank you, Lauren, and thank you for having me as well. So I am here.
So I'll allow you to share your slides now, and then when you're ready, you can start.
Give me 1 second.
No worries.
Can everyone see what I've shared?
Not so far. Have you hit share screen?
Yep, I have.
Oh, there we go. There we
go. Cool. Sorry, I pressed half of it. Right, I'm going to talk today a little bit about our view on risk culture and how we've been thinking about it through the Business Olympian Group. The Business Olympian Group, yep.
Before you start, do you want to just make your slides full screen?
Sure.
There we go.
Hello? So the Business Olympian Group does various activities in the risk management space, and primarily we're a group of people that are both risk managers and also organizational psychologists. So we have a big focus on behaviors and behavior risk and how behaviors ultimately influence risk outcomes. So what, through our research and analysis, what we believe has happened in the world of risk is we've invested heavily in governance, risk and compliance, and that's demonstrated through investment in core infrastructure such as governance, risk and compliance systems. We've been evolving as a risk community in terms of technical capability, how we identify risks, controls, how we provide assurance on controls, identify regulatory obligations and controls around those, etc. And what we've seen through that evolution is despite ongoing increased investment, things still go wrong. So we saw in the global financial crisis about 10 years ago how the financial services world almost blew up as a result of things that had gone wrong despite investment in controls. And more recently in the Australian environment through the Royal Commission, we've seen that a number of things have still gone wrong, specifically in the conduct risk space, despite ongoing investment in risk controls and governance, risk and compliance. And when we started to look at this in conjunction with some of the regulations that are out there, which I'm now talking about risk culture. And as we all know, the regulators are really asking board and senior leaders to demonstrate that they understand the risk culture in their organization, and they've got mechanisms in place to address risk culture challenges that exist. So we started to unpack this and say, okay, well, we've got risk and culture are two quite distinct disciplines. What does this mean as a term? And through speaking to a number of HR professionals who deal in the culture space and risk professionals who deal in the risk space, what we started to come up with is a view that three things happen in this space. First and foremost, organizations develop a performance culture. So every organization says we've got strategic objectives, we've got things that we want to be, and business leaders together with human resources put mechanisms in place to have a performance culture and deliver that. So you'll have an innovation culture, you'll have a learning culture, you may have a culture where people feel safe to explore and fail and iterate. And then on the other side of it, you've got all the guardrails that need to be put in place to ensure that people understand the barriers within which they work in order to deliver against that performance. And that's where traditional second-line risk teams have come in, where we build risk appetite statements and we put in manual controls and automated controls and assurance mechanisms to make sure that those controls are working. And essentially all of those things are there to protect an organization. That comes back to the first point. That's where all the investment's been, but things will go wrong. And that's where we've come in and we said there's a third component to this, which is actually culture risk, cultural behavioral risk. And what that means is teams and organizations start finding where some of the gaps are within the controls, and they start behaving in ways where they're able to circumvent the controls in a way where they can self-justify. So if we look at some of the things that happened in the Royal Commission, organizations were selling financial products to people that couldn't afford them. So despite having organizations identify mis-selling risk and some of the controls that were in there, teams were able to justify how they weren't mis-selling. So they could justify how they were helping customers meet affordability criteria, and in doing that, justifying being customer-centric, maybe to demonstrate that performance culture. So as we've been speaking to a number of risk teams and HR teams, and we've been speaking about risk culture, the part that starts becoming obvious in the risk world is risk teams generally say, well, how do we measure culture risk as another non-financial risk? So if behavior risk, culture risk is really where the problems are emerging, how do we actually start to measure that as part of our risk management mechanisms? And that becomes quite complicated because then you go, I've traditionally been a risk/audit expert where I'm very good at identifying risks, I'm very good at identifying controls and testing them, but how do I now go and really interact with people that make decisions every day and identify whether behaviors within those decisions could be exposing us to culture risk and problems down the line. So on the next slide, we talk about some of the traditional risk management programs that where the focus has been and where we believe some of the focus needs to shift in order to help measure culture as a non-financial risk. As I said, the first aspect is up until we've been very focused on compliance. So even in the modern age, we've invested in GRC tools. We focus on processes, systems, and how those work to deliver good risk outcomes. What we don't necessarily have are data points to measure behavior, so really rich data points to measure where behavior risk or culture risk may be emerging. And the root cause of that is often that risk teams haven't been resourced in a way where skills around measuring culture and behaviors are prevalent. So there's a little bit of a shift there where we go, how do we start diversifying the skill sets in risk teams to measure culture risk or behavior risk? Another challenge we've all got as risk people is you can't be everywhere at once. So if we're dealing in businesses which are geographically dispersed and you've got people that have to make decisions every day and exposed to environments that are geographically spread, how do you get risk people to really be engaged or be present to engage with those people and understand from those people what their environments look like and how they may be exposed to culture risk in terms of the decisions they make. So our view is, as a risk team, if we're going to help boards and senior leaders measure culture risk as a non-financial risk, we need to make it really simple, quantifiable, and actionable. As we all know, boards and senior leaders are, they're really inundated with a lot of information, and things like, risk culture are really new to them. So how do we provide them with insights which are really easy to digest and action? So what we said is risk teams should proactively understand and measure behaviors that drive the decisions that they make, or that teams make. We want to give risk teams the ability to qualitative data, so culture has traditionally been qualitative, into more measurable insights that leaders can use. And we also want risk teams to help leaders demonstrate an understanding of cultural attributes that exist that support good risk-based decisions. So that's really the overarching philosophy that we believe is important in this space to help risk teams measure culture as a non-financial risk. So the process we follow to do this, the process that we've designed has really got a few components. So a couple of overarching characteristics is we believe we need to create a psychologically safe environment where people in different teams doing different roles in an organization feel really safe to provide feedback on the environment within which they work and how that environment influences the decisions they make. So psychological safety is really important, and you need to provide that a mechanism where people can give feedback and speak up in a really anonymous and confidential manner. So that's really one. And the second characteristic is how do you give risk professionals the ability to engage with a lot of people in a team or a business unit to understand the behavior that they see? Because people at a more senior leadership level, for example, may see the behavioral climate slightly differently to people at a more junior level, or people in a frontline sort of role may see the environment differently to people in a more operational role. So how we do this is our mechanism is we use a few tools. So the first one is we do behavioral card sorting. So what we do is we send virtual card sorts to people across teams, and essentially what the card sorts do is it asks a question which is designed to test how an environment would influence decisions being made. And in each card we give a behavior that's positively reinforcing the behavior, a behavior that's opposed to it, one that's neutral, so people just don't see certain behaviors being in place, and one where there's sometimes. So sometimes there are consequences for doing the wrong thing, and sometimes there aren't consequences. And we look at behaviors across a number of categories which we believe influence decision making. So categories include things like senior leadership, middle management, risk strategy, performance management and incentives, etc. And that is really there to give a high-level indication of the behaviors that senior leaders should be aware of, as those are the behaviors which ultimately could influence the decisions people make. What we also do is we always want leaders to be able to access insights from card sorting, which is like a survey. It's a survey, but it doesn't have a 0 to 10 scale or a strongly agree to strongly disagree. It's just got agree. We see the behavior, we don't see it, we sometimes see it, or it's neutral. We want leaders to have real-time access to what those insights are saying, because we want to make sure that leaders can really demonstrate that they are understanding what people are saying, they're interacting with people across the organization, and they are putting immense focus on the things that seem to be important to people. Once leaders have done that, what we say is leaders need to go and do the root cause analysis. So they need to go ask people across the organization or the business the 5 whys around certain things that come up in card sorting. Say, for example, the card sorting says there's a problem around the way we do performance management, and maybe performance management is not aligned to behaviors that people demonstrate. We want senior leaders to be able to go out there and really understand why people may say that. So once again, to reinforce confidentiality, anonymity, and psychological safety, we have virtual focus groups. So in the virtual focus group, senior leaders go out to the people, wherever they are geographically, and they explore the card sorting which has demonstrated to be problematic. And I'll ask really, really simple questions, like give examples of why you don't see performance management aligning to behaviors, or where have you seen performance management not aligning to behaviors? Really simple things to do the why. And what the leaders do post the live chat is they take the insights that have come through that, and they can then go up to senior leaders and the board and help them fulfill their obligations of demonstrating that they've understood where culture risk may exist and the reasons behind that. So really, really, really clear action plans can be put in place, which would traditionally be led by the business leaders, risk and human resources. So most of the questions will have an angle where their leadership or management behaviors that are not driving good decisions, or where there are potential issues in the risk management approach, which is making it difficult for people to make decisions. So culturally, you may go, well, we keep on tightening our policies because we know that the regulatory landscape is tightening, but we don't invest in systems to align to the policies. So when that happens, people go, well, I can't make a simple decision because we're not investing in our technology enough to align to policies, and when you've got manual workarounds, it becomes quite complex. People then start becoming fearful of making mistakes. All of that, so what we then encourage is we want leaders to really have simple insights. So I've just put some little examples of how that can look in a report. So, for example, on a senior leader or board, you can really simply break down what are some of the strengths that people see from a behavioral standpoint and what are some of the challenges. So you start giving some visual reporting to leaders so they can take action on that as well. I've also just shown here what a live online virtual Q&A live chat can look like, where people can log on, provide feedback, and really do the 5 whys to unpack the root cause of potential cultural risk issues that exist. In a nutshell, that's it. So what I've tried to highlight there is just some mechanisms for risk teams to go out and really, in a simple and quantifiable manner, measure cultural and non-financial risk.
Thank you so much, Justin. That was really interesting. And as I said at the beginning, it's risk culture is something that I've been focusing on editorially this year and plan to do so next year. So you've also given me about 20 more topics that I need to cover off in the next year, which is always helpful. If I can just go to a question that's come through. Somebody's asked, what first steps would you advise risk managers to take to tackle this issue?
Really, really good question. So first and foremost is you need to align with the organization on what you as a risk person understand risk culture to be. Interestingly enough, this topic has fallen broadly into risk teams. So the alignment is really important. So one of the things you need to do is you need to align with the business leadership team to talk about your understanding of the topic, how you will create something that's going to give them insights, but you also have to partner with your HR team very, very closely. So because the topic of culture comes in, which is generally managed by human resources, a very, very strong relationship is needed. So what I would do is I first and foremost interact with human resources. I talk about infrastructure that human resources have got in place to measure culture within an organization, and then see what tools the risk team can bring in and supplement to really measure the cultural attributes that influence risk-based decision-making. So when human resources measures culture, often it's through an engagement survey, and you'll ask questions like, do we have good flexibility in the organization? And if you've got good flexibility, people may go, yes, I love working here, you're engaged. And from a cultural standpoint, there's a lot of real positive feedback. What the risk manager's job is to go, okay, well, we've got all these cultural attributes which are bringing people to work every day. Where does that expose us to risk? So if you've got people that are really engaged because they love the flexibility, if they've also got really, really, really tight financial budgets, and their manager's saying, sell, 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 or otherwise you may not have a job here, that can be contradictory. So you could have on one hand a really engaged workforce, but also a workforce where there's emerging behavioral risk because people want to work there but they're stretchers. So it's really important to have that dialogue with HR to see where their measurement may differ to what a risk person would do, and then how you can work together with a business leadership team to help them measure the two together. The other very, very, very important aspect is if you're measuring culture risk as a non-financial risk, being able to triangulate the insights from the work you do in this space with the insights from your GRC work. Because what you want to do is you want to say, once I've done my traditional risk management work, I want to be able to articulate where culture is a root cause of something that has gone wrong, versus where culture may be a leading key risk indicator that we want to get on top of before something goes wrong.
That's a really good point. I have a question which has popped up a couple of times for me as I've been covering that, of how to deal with resistance. People who just aren't interested, don't care, and it's not really their problem.
Look, very, very good question. Look, it's always about, even as a risk person, you have to be a bit of a salesperson. So it's putting the business case together. Now, interestingly, as risk people, we spend a lot of time, we speak to people, we do walkthroughs, we get massive loads of documentation to validate that things are working or not. But actually, your richest insight as a risk manager often comes from what people are telling you. So when people articulate what they do on a day-to-day basis and where they see some of the risks, you often find a disconnect between that and then what your control says on paper or what your risk says on paper. So part of the sales pitch is really engaging with people who manage risk every single day, who are the people at the coalface of the business, and using the insights from them to streamline and simplify the traditional work you'd normally do. So instead of saying, here are my 10 risks and my 75 controls that I'm going to test, try and engage with people to see where the risks are and then validate that through evidence. That's a really powerful way of influencing.
We've had another question come through from the audience. Is your experience that risk managers are measuring behaviours already, or is this a brand new concept that's just started and therefore is in its infancy?
I think the concept's probably been out there for a number of years now. So I think the global financial crisis is where regulators started going, actually, we keep on investing in risk management, but things will go wrong, and there's a cultural aspect. I think a lot of people have been grappling with it for a long time, but specifically in the Australian landscape, since the Royal Commission and since the APRA self-assessment and CBA, people are thinking about it a lot more deeply. So what we saw in the CBA self-assessment is, there were a whole lot of risk culture challenges, and then APRA came out a few months later and said organizations are still not demonstrating an understanding of their risk culture. People are going, well, the regulators keep saying we're not doing it even though we think we are doing it. Now, my view is what's happened is we keep on talking about governance, non-financial risk governance in one bucket, and then we talk about risk culture in another bucket. I think that's actually quite confusing, because I think actually what the heart of all of this is you've got culture risk, and the regulators are saying to organizations, demonstrate that you've got governance over that risk. And to me it's something that, I question whether we should be talking about those as two separate topics, or whether we need to, look at culture risk which requires governance.
Had a controversial question here. Is there such thing as risk culture?
What was that?
The controversial question is there such thing as risk culture?
Well, I think that's the point that I've been making. So my point thinking about it is, I think there are two things. I think there's a risk climate which you put in, you establish, and that's your governance risk and compliance system, it's your manual controls, it's your automated controls, it's your controls testing, it's all the symbols in an organization to enforce guardrails to do the right thing. I think my perspective is a lot of the commentary we've all read about is actually talking more about culture risk. So despite all the investment in risk infrastructure, things will go wrong. How do we govern culture as a risk class?
That's a really good point.
I think risk culture has become a buzzword for saying that.
And do you think risk culture is something that mostly hangs around the risk department, or do you think we're actually making inroads in sort of filtering it through every department?
Definitely making inroads now. I think, once again, 5 years ago, I think risk teams started taking responsibility for it. I think over the past year there's been a shift towards boards in particular and senior leaders going, this is actually really important. Let's really try and understand what it means and iterate the way we do things to demonstrate we know this.
And if I can ask one more question before I go. If you had a tip for everyone, that what should they do? They get off, if they get offline, where should they go next? How do they go back to their business?
If they get offline?
As in, they get off this webinar and they want to go and do something, action something this afternoon. What's the very first thing they should do?
Look, I would say, as a risk person, the number one partnership and ally you're going to have in this space is human resources. So what I'd be doing is I'd be speaking to some of the human resources leadership and saying, you help the organization establish and maintain a good organizational culture. We help, design the guardrails to keep the organization safe. How do we work together to measure where there could be cultural risk indicators or behavioral risk indicators? How do we collectively measure that so we can help leaders understand where the pain points may be, and very, very, very importantly, put good, tangible actions in place? Because often when you're talking about behavior risk or culture risk, the root of it is in leadership and management. There's a really, really, really human element to it. And often leaders are very confronted because they go, I'm putting a mirror in front of me and I'm seeing that maybe their leadership and management, challenges around the way we're getting people to make decisions. You need people that are really, really experienced to help those people put the mirror in front of their face, but very, very importantly, to shift the behaviors and the leadership attributes to enable good outcomes. So first action for me would be work with human resources, be really, really, really clear on what they do, what risk does, and how you can work together to bring in this new element.
Thank you so much, Justin. I really appreciate it. And everyone will be able to see your screen and see that your contact details are up there. So anyone who wants to reach out and ask for more information from Justin, I'm sure that he will be happy to help you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lauren.
Next up, in about half an hour at 3 o'clock Sydney time, we have Chris Corliss, who will be chatting to us about why your risk is still analog, basically, why your risk tools are still analog, which is really important in a digital age. So either stay on the line or come back in half an hour. We'll see you then.